All right. So basically, I'm going to start off with a story. But before we watch the story, I'm going to set it up with this, even though it's not really a part of the story. Well, you'll get what I'm trying to get at. Okay. The Karate Kid is definitely a big part of my youth.
Tonight it's very clear as we're both lying here. There's so many things I wanna say. I will always love you. I would never leave you alone. Sometimes I just forget, say things I might regret. It breaks my heart to see you crying. I don't wanna lose you. I could never make it alone. I am a man who would fight for your honor. I'll be the hero you're dreaming of. We'll live forever, knowing together that we did it all for the glory.
Okay, so they did it all for the glory of love. Now, let's talk about environmental compliance approvals. And you might be wondering, what does this have to do with environmental compliance approvals? Hold on. We need to go to another story. So a few years, no, that's not a few years. It's actually about, what is it, 2025. So if you go back to 2012 or 11, I think, we were actually sitting around doing nothing that much that day when we get a call. And why do we get a call? Why do we get a call? So this facility, they recycle material and they create products from recycled paper, cardboard boxes, right? So they are basically set up in the northern GTA. So let's say that's their facility. And it's a new market. And the interesting thing is that they've actually got a connection to the local storm sewer. So water can drain on their property. So I actually think that it's outside the building. It can drain into the storm sewer. It's not sanitary. Remember, storm goes straight to, where does it go straight to? Interestingly enough, it goes straight to, I don't have this, I'm going to use green. A local creek. So this water enters this local creek. It's a natural water body. What do you think the company can enter, can pour into the sewer? Does anybody want to tell me, can they pour anything into the sewer? Remember, what does this? No, yep, Jeffrey, you're right. What do they need to do when they have effluent water from their manufacturing? What do they need to do? They need to either treat it and send it to a sanitary, or they need to have permission to send it straight to sanitary. To sanitary sewer. Yeah, you can filter it, treat it. Exactly, exactly. But what was this company doing? So what were they doing? It's instead of filtering it, treating it, or getting it shipped out. So like a company like Detox can come and pump that effluent and take it to a facility where they treat it. Or back in the day, it used to be AccuWorks, and I think GFL also does this now. GFL. So GFL can do that. Come with a vac truck, right? So remember, in 2008-9, the world went through a crisis whose after a financial crisis whose after effects were felt all the way through 2012-13, and then things did get better, at least in some sectors. So in order to save money, what do you think they were doing with their effluent? They were, oh, I'm gonna use a different color here. They were pouring it into this. Do you think the average worker knows that they should not do that? Some do. Some do. Now, let us say you are in HR. You are in HR. Do you think workplace romances are a good idea? They would say no. But at this place, there was a workplace romance. And remember, they're suffering from the after effects of the financial crisis. You want to look at that? It's an important time in our recent history. They laid off. They laid off one of the romance partners. Then what happened? Well, what do you think happened then? Then the romance partner, what did she do? She did it. She called the Ministry of the Environment. Why? All for the glory of love. Because she wanted them to come and help, protect the environment. But not really. She did it for the glory of love. She's just like the Karate Kid. So, the Ministry of the Environment comes to the site. What's the first thing that they ask for? What's the first thing that they ask for? Do you have an environmental compliance approval? Back then, I wasn't teaching full time. I wasn't working anywhere full time. My father was not well, and I was in what I like to call my let me know. So I used to be in what I like to call my Better Call Sajjad days. So whenever anybody had a problem with the environmental authorities, guess who they used to call? They used to call Better Call Sajjad.
Good job until my boss accused me of stealing. I better call Saul. I was out partying, minding my own business.
You are under arrest.
I'd better call Saul. Hi, I'm Saul Goodman. Did you know that you have rights? The Constitution says you do, and so do I. I believe that until proven guilty, every man, woman, and child in this country is innocent. And that's why I fight for you, Albuquerque.
Better call Saul.
So people used to call me whenever they had an environmental compliance issue. Why? Because I had nothing else to do, and I was cheap. So I went, and the second thing that they asked for, I need to fix this smelling room. The second thing that they asked for was, who is your consultant? Who's your remediation contractor? Who is your QP? By QP, what do they mean? A person who has the training and education and is a PEng or a PGO. Back then, they also used to accept people who were CETs. They got rid of that a while ago, but we're trying to get that reinstated because so what they were breaking several rules. Why? They did not have an ECA. They did not have permission from the city. Basically, what ended up happening is that the the effluent was causing impairment. There's biological oxygen demand issues. There were particulate matter. The temperature was an issue. And there were some chemicals. So we came up with a strategy to help him. And the first thing we did was we had to do an inspection of the sewer. So we had to go down and inspect the sewer system to make sure that there was no residual contamination because it's already flooding the creek. So that was deemed to be acceptable by the ministry, that we're going to clean it up. We're going to make sure that there's nothing left in the sewer. And then what we're going to do is, so we dammed off the creek, and then we also got help from the ministry people to make sure that if we need to take any fish or amphibians out, we were able to do that. But you know what was the best part about this whole thing? You know what I ran into in the sewer? You won't believe it. Yep, that's what I ran into in the sewer. It was a really hard experience, but anyways, we were able to scare off Pennywise and then do the contamination cleanup. So they said to them, either you have to get an ECA or you have to treat it before discharging it to the storm sewer. But either way, you need permission either from the city, not storm sewer, sanitary sewer. You need permission either from the city or from the government or the provincial government. So that's sort of where we're at with this story. And in the end, they were able to save their business. Otherwise, they would have been prosecuted. But whenever you have situations where you are, so I'm trying to list some of those situations where you are dealing with discharging something to the environment. If you're discharging to the air, So that's besides fugitive emissions. Like if your car is discharging to the air, they're not going to need an ECA. You're breathing carbon dioxide, you're not going to need an ECA. Or you have a furnace in your house, not something like that. But if it's a industrial size or commercial size facility and you're discharging to the air, in most cases you'll need that. You'll need to get an ECA. If you're discharging to to a water body, if you're managing waste. So these are typical reasons why you would get an ECA. As a contractor, environmental contractor, if you're performing environmental I'll just put enviro ISCO, so Institute Chemical Oxidation and Remediation. You would also need a ECA. Maybe we'll take a look at one of the applications that we've seen. So for a period of about 5 or 6 years, that's all that I did part-time. Do you think this person who snitched on the company did the right thing? I just like to get your thoughts on it, so just give me a second here. Yeah, we were about 10 people. Did she do the right thing? Okay, let's see what you guys think. So let's shoot this poll. So there's about 10 of you here. So hopefully all of you will give me your opinion. Only 6 have so far. Interesting. So I actually, I'm going to share the results. So 2 people said yes. Interesting. I partially agree. 2 people said no. I disagree. So my option was yes, but not for the right reason. Right? The intended consequence was positive. Now, so I'm going to be very clear on this. I would not throw my employer under the bus because, I tend to want to um, help my employer. I don't want to hurt them. I mean, I'm living, I'm sustaining my lifestyle. However, if they are breaking the law, there's 2 things to be done. One, you go to the upper management and you let them know like this is wrong. We'll always be ready to be let go in the future. 2, you just resign and walk away. And third option is you're going to say, look, if you don't stop this, I have to report this as a professional. Okay. So, because let's say they get prosecuted, and if they go after a lot of people in the company, usually it's mostly restricted to the officers of the company. But if you, as a practicing professional, know something is being done to break the law, you could also have issues as well, especially if you're licensed as a CET or PNG or PG. Okay. The thing is, Aiden, when I heard this whole thing, for some uncanny reason, that song from that movie, Karate Kid, We Did It All for the Glory of Love, it just kept coming to mind, right? That's why I like to, this way you'll never forget that lesson. Also remember, I know we're not in Derry, Maine, but you never know where Pennywise can turn up. It's interesting. A few years ago, I had a class of students, like, for whatever reason, that day, all only international students were there. And they had no idea who Pennywise was. And I was really disappointed because I even had the poster and everything set up. They were like, what is a clown doing in the sewer? But then again, they're the same people who they might not get my humor. I used to teach an environmental sampling class, and people asked me what I did before. I told them I was a gangster rapper, the notorious DIN. And one of the students, she was in the modeling business from Russia, and she thought I was just like her, where I had a different career before, and then I left that career. So she wanted to leave the fashion career to become a environmental professional because you have to be really strict about your lifestyle in modeling. In my case, it was completely false, and I thought it was funny. And I had to end the session. I had to tell people that if you heard me say I was a Bollywood actor, that is not true. Okay, let's get into the slides for today. But before we do that, I want to remind you that we do have, we do, have some work to do this week as well. So I'm going to need you guys to work with your group mates. So, towards the end of the class, I'll get you guys started. Work with your group mates to finish online assignment number 5. So that's the assignment that's due this week. And what is that assignment? Let's take a look. So the good thing about these assignments is that the bar is set low where if you complete the task, you will get the mark. Let's see. So today, what you're going to need to do is, or this week, choose a topic with your group members for the term project. So your work time for this week is going to be finding a topic with your group. If any of you does not have a group, stay at the end of the class. We will create your group from the people who are left behind, okay? That way, you will be able to tell me, okay, we don't have a group, but we need to have a group. And that way, you will have covered off what needed to be done for assignment number 4. But this way, you will be able to then work on creating a group and finding a topic. I'm going to give you guys some examples as well at the end of the class, which I think you can use. Like, the nuns suing the adult entertainment, or if you want to look at the pesticide ban, it's another one that I think is interesting. I also think that there's a big company, GFL, they got fined for distributing waste soil in a way that was not considered ethical. But we can look at different cases for you to select, unless you have something that you prefer on your own. Okay? Any questions before we get into our main topic today? Yeah, I got one person who's looking for a group, so we'll try to get that person a group. Intend. Everybody else here have a group? Good. So the one thing that we can do is, and those of you who are not watching this live, which you should, because this time you're supposed to be here. Okay, great question, Gazim. I'm going to give you guys some examples at the end of today's session. Okay? Like there's some famous cases that you can find, but I'll give you guys some parameters where to look. Okay? All right. There are no more questions for today. I can get into the topics. So an environmental compliance approval is required, like I said earlier, if you're going to have contaminants emitted to the environment, and this also includes noise. You get it from the provincial government, from the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks. Another interesting thing I wanted to point out here is that depending on who is in charge, they keep changing the names of the Ministry of the Environment. It used to be the MECP, MOECC. Before that, it was the MOE. Now it's the MECP. Another interesting aspect is The ECA can also cover vibration, noise, and even clean potable water if you have to emit it into the environment. Now, before 2011, so remember I was telling you that I got really active in this area? Well, part of it is because after 2011, they became more aggressive in getting people to get their ECAs. A lot of people never got their ECAs, so the ministry started to try to get more and more people to either get their ECA or get an updated one. And one of the main areas that covers is the Ontario Water Resources Act. Why? Because a lot of this work that is being done for ECAs is to protect our water resources. So let's now go through an example. Let's go through an example. So a few years ago, a company came to me. And this was in the Better Call Sajad era. It was before the pandemic. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to take liquid domestic waste, the Northern Ontario community, and they wanted to discharge it into a lagoon. So basically, lagoon, if you're looking at from the air, basically a rectangular trench. If you look at it from a cross-sectional point of view, it was a series of parallel trenches. Don't remember exactly how long it was. It was about 30 meters, 40 or 100 meters long. And about 10 meters. No, I think this is way too much. 50 meters long and about 3.5 meters wide. And about 2 meters deep. I think it was a little bit sloped. So you might ask me, why would they allow this to take liquid domestic waste? What does that mean? It means that the community basically has uh, their 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 washrooms, their kitchens, all of it flushing into a tank, which is then pumped out. And that is pumped. Yes, sir. Stefan is right. So it's pumped out, and then they pour it into the lagoon. Now, what would happen here? Well, there's natural decay. So there's natural decay. How does it work? There's natural decay of organic material. Then there's also, like in a septic system, so microbes consume. Maybe that's part and parcel with that, but I just wanted to make sure that there was this thing that's microbes are also consuming the organic waste. And then what is happening is that it is, so let's say this is the waste, it is filtering into the subsurface. So you're hoping that at some point, the contaminant portion gets filtered out. So it becomes diluted. And by the time, use green again, I don't have blue right now these days. By the time it reaches the water table, it is no longer a major concern. Maybe a slight concern, but they put on a bunch of restrictions. Like one of the first ones is that they have to be like 1.5 kilometers away from a drinking water well. They have to be 1.5 kilometers away from a drinking water well, right? And once all these restrictions were put in place, they also had to have monitoring wells in place to make sure that the effluent is that it's not going to get to an actual drinking well. You can take samples and you'll have early detection if you have any issues. And that's where they were granted their ECA. And the nice thing was back then, they used to let them actually, they used to let people actually in the local offices grant ECAs. Let me see if I can find that ECA anymore here. You know, you can look up ECAs at a public website as well. Access environment. Just takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's pretty good. See old projects. Lagoon. Right here, take a look at our design report that was submitted. Get an idea what I'm talking about. As it's a part of the application package, you do have to submit a design and operations report, which has this information in it. We give the site characteristics, the soil characteristics, the surface water, any previous reports. What are the subsurface conditions? What's the groundwater quality? You get Darcy's law. I know you're learning that. You assess the groundwater quality. You assess the percolation rate, the grain size content. And I'm assuming you're learning this stuff in classes. You've got the liquid waste operations. You describe the trench design. Ah, I got it wrong. It was 73 meters, 3.1 meters wide, and only 0.9 meters deep. You also have to give them information on documentation, and there should be a discussion with the application forms. I don't have. I was hoping to show you guys the design. You also have to give them the. You also have to give them the vehicle information as well. So from the air, this is what it was looking like. This is the old trenches, and they wanted to put in new trenches. What else is there? I'd like to show you the cross-sectional view as well. This is how they looked in the cross-section. 6 trenches side by side parallel across the site. Okay, so that was the work that was done to get them their ECA. Any questions about that? Questions? So there could be ECAs for Section 9 of the Environmental Protection Act, and that would be for air and noise. That's basically for activities where contaminants that are discharged into the environment other than into the water, and it includes industrial process as well. You also have ECAs under Section 27 for waste or Section 53 for sewage project. Now, those are really, really hard to get processed, especially if it's if for a municipality. So there is a lot of work that has to be done. Now they're trying to make it as straightforward as possible. And for some low risks sites or low risk activities, they're trying to make it easier to get an ECA, but it's always been a long process, like a year or so it takes. So now, for example, the ECA for air is that no person shall use, operate, construct, alter, extend, or replace any plant, structure, equipment, apparatus, mechanism, or thing that may discharge a contaminant into any part of the natural environment other than water, or alter process of rate of production so that a contaminant may be discharged. That's for the air. You can see for waste, it's to operate, establish, alter, enlarge, or extend a waste management system or waste disposal site. And then you've got an ECA for water, where this is basically focused on sewage works. So if you want to go to the application link, let's go ahead and find that. So basically we can clip or cut or copy and go to the application page. Copy that. Go to the website, environmental compliance approval application, and download the form. And then you can open it up. So this is what the application form looks like. This is the information that you would have to put together in order to get approval. Let's save this on my desktop. I know you might have an application form ready and saved up, but they make subtle changes or like slight changes from time to time. And that's why you want to put it together or download it and put it together with a new fresh form every time, including information like you got all of this project information, what type of ECA it is. Do you have a previous ECA? Do you have other permits at the site? Is it exempt on the EBR? Like when they're approving ministry approval, they do post it on the EBR for public consultation and public comment. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to give you guys a clip here. So 10, and it's a webinar. We're not going to watch all of it, but it's a webinar about ECAs.
To shoot them in the Q&A section at the bottom. You should have a window that pops up and you can write in any questions. Feel free to do so as we go or at the end at the Q&A part, and we'll be happy to have a discussion at that point. And we have a few polls along the way. So if you if you see a poll pop up, please enter your information, and we'd like to know more about you. So as we go along, you'll see some boxes pop up. So feel free to participate in some of the polls that we run as well. So what are we presenting today? So we'll talk a little bit about ourselves, just a brief intro to Civica and the presenters that are here today. Talk about the purpose for the webinar, why we're all here, why is it important. We'll go through our insights. So we've summarized a number of insights that we've identified through going through the documentation that the ministry has provided, and so we'll have some high-level insights to those and some challenges as well. Do a bit of a summary and then a Q&A at the end. So that's the plan for today. Just a little bit about Civica. So Civica is located
Sorry,
in
Matt.
Vaughan. Sorry.
I was going to say the slides aren't actually showing.
Oh, you can't see them. Well, that would be not good then.
I can see them. I could see them.
Oh, you could?
Oh.
Yeah.
And this is just from the ministry, and this kind of shows the timeline as to what the impact or when municipalities can expect to have to submit applications to get this new consolidated linear infrastructure ECA application. So the decision came down just this past spring in March that they were moving forward with implementing the CLI ECA regulations. There have been some municipalities already that have gone through the process for various aspects of their systems. So if anybody's attended some of the WEO events, there's Peel and City of Barrie have both gone through some of the process for particularly their stormwater systems. And so the ministry, if you haven't already got a letter, maybe you will be getting one soon in terms of engaging with municipalities to get those applications going. And it seems like it's going to be rolled out to, probably more of the larger municipalities that have more resources, and then kind of trickle down to medium and smaller size municipalities as this year progresses on. And so this is sort of the initial timeline for at least some of those.
Oh, if you guys could pay attention, this is the reason that we're watching this is about to give you an idea of the timeline for a complicated ECA application.
First batch of municipalities that are going to get the letters from the ministry, but we kind of foresee over the next 6 to 12 months that most municipalities will get these letters, and that will kind of trigger this process. So I guess just another quick poll that we wanted to do, and that was to see how familiar you are with these regulations, and what kind of impact this may have on you as a municipality or as a consultant. So just give it a few more seconds. So it looks like we have, somewhat familiar, somewhat unfamiliar, and very unfamiliar. So nobody's very familiar, I would say, with the regulations, but there's some people that have some familiarity with it. And most are kind of on the unfamiliar to very unfamiliar side of things. So hopefully this will be a good sort of intro to some of the regulations. And at least, again, we're not going into the details of how to put together an application, but this is more high level in terms of what this may how this may impact you, and some of the challenges we foresee with the regulations, as well as some ideas around solutions or impacts that maybe you can implement and ideas you can implement going forward. So with that, we'll start with the first sort of insight into these regulations, and I'll pass it over to Ilmar to talk about the first 4 or 5 sort of insights into the regulations.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. So for these, for those of you that are attending, I'm really appreciative of the fact that we're probably all very new in this. I mean, Matt just did that poll where it's somewhat familiar, maybe not so familiar, and because everything is brand new, it does create an opportunity to learn this together. So for those that may not be aware, the consolidated linear infrastructure permissions approach is related to low-risk projects for sewage collection and stormwater management systems. And the goal is to reduce red tape and approvals when delivering infrastructure projects. And the improvements are intended to.
That's one of the biggest challenges. The red tape is what they call it. Even with very good complete submissions, it takes a long time to get them approved because there's various layers of approvals that it has to go through.
Create an efficient process that allows for certain pre-authorized system alterations. Also to provide clear, transparent, and consistent requirements for the applications and asset owners, and to improve environmental protection through updated and consolidated terms and conditions. And finally, to establish a more comprehensive picture of sewage works across the province, both for the provincial benefit as well as creating consistency for all of us. So what is the challenge that this poses to the industry? In the journey to the ministry's goal of comprehensive information, the municipalities will be required to participate in the renewed process and provide details on existing infrastructure, information that may not necessarily.
As you probably already
That's sort of to
know,
give you guys an idea of how much of a headache this can be to get the paperwork done and the details. So a simple lagoon to a big infrastructure project can all be very, very challenging. Okay, so we're pretty much coming to the end of the first part of the class today. So I'm going to now just ask you guys to let me take a bit of a break. We're almost at 50 minutes. So let's come back in about 5 minutes or so. I'll see you then. Okay, hold on. Do these hurdles encourage people to ignore the regulations? Yes, but it's a risk. It's like, for example, in OREG 406, when we do our presentations to clients, they ask us, well, what would happen if we don't follow the regulation? It's like if you don't file your taxes correctly, there's a chance that nothing would happen. But when they look into your taxes, or if they audit you one day, you would then have a lot of problems. Similarly, usually if nobody makes any complaint, and you like remember the story of the two people who one was emotionally attached to the other, and when he got let go, she complained against the company. You will find that nothing would have happened to them. They would have kept pouring contaminated water out into that creek because it was little enough that nobody in the public would notice it. So if you stayed with us into the third year, you will meet people who are from this program, who that's all they do. They go out and shut down or catch people who are doing that. I call them environmental police, but they're city bylaw officers. Okay, like I said, it's time for a bit of a break. And I'm gonna go grab some snack. I'll see you guys in about 5 minutes. So there's a question that was asked before the break, but what happens if people ignore these when people do? So there's a few things I want to point out. If the ministry finds that it's just ignorance, innocent ignorance, they will educate the people, and they will actually give some advice to get them started. And usually what they'll do is they'll say, hire a consultant. They'll advise them to hire a consultant. That's where I used to come in. But if it's on purpose, so that's scenario one. Scenario two, if they've been warned on purpose and they're ignoring, so not ignorance, they're ignoring the ministry, they will threaten them with prosecution or a work order. And if it is so bad that there's harm that could happen to people, they will have them shut down. Almost never happens though. This almost never happens. I've never heard of it happen, except in one instance. In one instance. I'll tell you what happened. So I got called to help this guy get an ECA amendment. And the ministry blocked them. Said, we're shutting them down. And the lawyer, he comes to me and he says, I need your help. I said, sure. What do you need? He said, you need to update this ECA. I said, well, for the work that you're asking me to do, we usually charge about 2,500 to 3,500. He kept yelling at me and arguing with me, and I said, I don't want to do the work if you don't want to pay me. He said, no, you're gonna help us do just for 1,000. It's gonna be so easy. It was not so easy, and I said, I'm not gonna do it for less than 1,500. But I'm not gonna give additional support. Usually when I do it for this, I do a lot of follow-up. I do a lot of communication with the ministry about the ECA. So it's not just the application, it's the liaising communications follow-up. I stay on it for up to, whatever time it takes. Usually it's a year and a half, maximum 2 years. So it's usually a year to year and a half. So this guy, it turns out that they wouldn't tell me everything. The ministry stopped talking to me. And this lawyer wouldn't tell me anything until I found out through a third party. Those, don't tell anybody I told you this, but this is what's going on. So this guy basically drove to a place where there was a creek, and he was hauling waste in one of those trucks that you pump the hazardous waste into the container. It's like a vac. It looks like a cement truck, but it's not. And you're supposed to take it to a licensed facility. What did he do? He emptied it all out into the creek at 3 a.m. There was an office building across the street. And guess what that office building had? Camera. Do you know what the word camera means? Do you know that it's an Arabic word? It means room, a dark room. Kamra. But that's a whole different story. So this camera, which has nothing to do with where the word comes from into the English language 1,000 years ago, caught all of this on tape. And they sent it to the MECP. Actually, they sent it to the city and the police. And then I think they referred it to the MECP. So that was an example of where they shut it down. Yes, sir. They did back in the day. So since Stefan started it, let's just touch upon it. So virtually everything in the world goes back to the Islamic Golden Age. But then this goes back to the Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Persians, Indians, Hindus, and so on. And what happened is that they were in the geographic location that was able to combine the knowledge from a lot of these places and put it together. That's a story for another day. Islamic Golden Age, or as Fox News calls them, the evil ones. Okay, continuing on. So what ended up happening is I told the lawyer, I said, listen, I don't work with people who on purpose break the law. In fact, I report such people. And there's an ethical and legal obligation as an environmental professional to report people in only one situation. I did not report these people. They were caught on the camera. So they were shut down. I used to also work for the government. And which government was that? I call them the Roman Empire of today. Who is the Roman Empire of today? Who is the Roman Empire of today? Do you guys want to tell me who you think that is? Who do you consider the Roman Empire of today? 100%. So I used to work in the government in the United States. And I was always the most unpopular person in the government. I'll give you an example. When we were talking about waste management, we would actually have to advise people like the US military about waste management, for example, where they did their weapons testing. So I was a part of the government under the the Florida, at the time I was working for the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP. And there was a place called, let's see if you can guess. In Florida, what place is associated with a mouse? What place is associated with a mouse? Yes, sir, Disneyland. So let's go. Let's take a trip down there. So this is what usually happens. Now, I don't work in the government in Canada. I worked in the US. Okay. This is what usually happens. And I'm gonna give it to you from the government point of view. So what ended up happening in their case is they ended up causing a spill. So in one of their parks, they actually have a launch, right, for boat. So over here, they've got tanks. They did not have secondary containment, and the tank leaked straight into this water body here. And so what they've been doing is they cleaned up the water body, but then they realized that the leak was also in the groundwater underneath the tank, and it was seeping in. So they had to install a water treatment system. In those situations, Kazim, are you referring to the New York Yankees? By the way, it looks like my blue is working, the team of today. Okay, so this is what usually happens is like Disney, they said, we're gonna take care, we're gonna clean it up. And uh, we were just supervising it or monitoring it and making sure it was done. That's usually what happens. But if Disney or anybody else went out and started to do things illegally, then it's a different story. We actually had, and I'll tell you another funny story. So I was working for the opera as a supernumerary, and I was in Aida. So if you ever look into the history of Aida, it was an opera written by, I believe it was Italians or the French, and it was written for the Ottoman Emperor, the Pasha, who was at the time ruling Egypt. So Aida was was the opera. And I was so happy that I was in the opera as a supernumerary. I thought it was because of my incredible handsomeness, but I found out later it was just to save money on makeup. Because to Americans, we all look the same, apparently. South Asian, Middle Eastern. So that was that. But I actually had to quit that project because I was working for the opera, and the opera also had a tank that leaked. They also were paying for it, the Orlando Opera Company, and they made sure that it was taken care of. So that's usually what happens. Even if you get caught without an ECA, or if you don't follow your ECA, the people will allow us to, the people at the ministry will allow us to rectify things. Like I said, in my personal life, I've only seen it one time where they completely shut down a business. But what could they do? That creek that they were pouring hazardous waste was leading straight into a water body where there were a lot of creatures that would be affected negatively. And so, although I don't have the Alabama accent, but I do have some stories to tell you, being in the wrong place at the right time, like Forrest Gump. Okay, so then there's a regulation 255/11 under which the requirements of the application are set out, right? So you want to have a description of the activities. You want to make sure that the entire processes are shown. There should be a diagram also that shows the different steps in the design and operation report. Air emission qualities that are to be met are covered under 419/05. So the point of impingement, meaning where that air hits a person or is going to be received by a person, it has to be meeting the regulations. So I'll show you one of those reports, the air emissions dispersion modeling. So what you end up doing is before you get an ECA, in certain situations, you have to do some air or noise modeling. So if you're emitting something to the atmosphere, and it's the same for water as well, you have to do some water modeling. So let's say this is your emission stack. This is the property boundary. So they want to know, they want to make sure that point of impingement, don't trust my spelling here. I think I got that right, impingement. Where somebody is standing here and breathing, somebody who might be impacted. So we do an air emissions dispersion model. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to calculate how far the impact could be for people at or at neighboring properties, at the actual property or at neighboring properties. Let's see if I can find something here for you guys. Emissions ESDM report. Don't have the report, but I'll show you the guideline. It's under 419/05. So I just wanted to point another thing out. It might seem daunting, all these different numbers, but really, once you start working on the business, it doesn't really, it's not too hard. You pick up things quickly. So here is the guidance document for how you perform the air emissions modeling. And it gives you which software you can use and who can prepare the report. Well, who's required to prepare the report. It used to be if you were an environmental professional with some background, you were able to prepare the report. Now, recently, they seem to be pushing back. They want you to actually have an engineering degree. But don't ever think that if you don't have an engineering degree, you can't do this work. Somebody with an engineering degree has to sign the document. I have staff who, even today, they are always working on these projects. They're not PGOs or PNGs, but one of us who is a PNG or PGO signs the document. I would say that common harming the very creatures they depict. Yeah, that was the interesting thing. So because Disney has a certain image to protect, we were not allowed to write Disney on their reports. It was always WDW. Walt Disney World. Now, to be fair, they did do the cleanup and they were doing the best that they could, but they did not want to have a bad image from an environmental point of view. And yes, I did get to have lunch with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And this was before Gal Gadot, and I don't remember the other actress's name, made a movie where they got everybody in the world upset because of a Middle Eastern conflict. Yes, Rachel Ziegler. I'll never forget her comment about how it was weird. The original story was weird. I'll never forget that. Also, I mean, I asked somebody, is this Snow White or is this something else? But I never saw it. I never ended up seeing it. Okay, all right. Any questions at this time? I don't know if that is even existing. I've never heard that, Stefan. I always assumed he was buried like a normal person. So while we're at it, why don't we take a look at what an ECA actually looks like? Yeah, I've heard of that for other people. I've never actually heard of that about Walt Disney. He was a heavy chain smoker, so I think that might have had an impact on how long he lived. This is what an actual ECA looks like here. And it's for this numbered company. It's an amended ECA. There's a number, there's a date. This is for an asphalt mixing plant and a concrete plant. And it covers all aspects. It'll have the definitions. It'll refer to the reports that were sent in. So there's an acoustics report. They also did an acoustics audit as well. Interesting. And they refer to emissions as well. If it's talking about emissions, there must be an emission summary table. There you go. And they probably did a ESDM, an emissions summary and dispersion modeling report. And based on the information given for the emissions and the noise, they were able to obtain their ECA, and they refer to one of the regulations here. And see, point of impingement. I was close, although I made sure you couldn't read the spelling. So this is the actual spelling. Impingement. Might have missed an E in my spelling. And then here are some of the bylaws or the ministry laws that they have to follow for the sound regulations. They give the conditions that the company who has the ECA has to follow them. All right. I'm getting closer. You can also get something similar. It's the renewable energy approvals, although the RIAs are a little bit slightly different, but they are for projects that are for renewable energy. And some of the steps that are taken under OREG 359/09, you need to have a public consultation. Like, for example, that's what they did for the wind farms. And there is room for a citizen's appeal as well. Now, certain projects, though, that might cause irreversible health are the only ones that they can appeal. In place of a ECA, you might be able to get an ESER, which is just a simpler method where you just fill out some information there for low risk or minimal risk activities that are standard, like an auto repair shop where they have spraying. It's typical. You don't really need to get a separate ECA. Here are some examples. Automotive refinishing, commercial printing, heating systems, non-hazardous waste transportation, small solar plants. So the next topic that I don't know if I can have the time to get into it is the record of site condition. And I don't want to get into it right now, so I'm going to leave it for now. But I do want to get into the record of site condition at a certain point. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to end today's session, or not end, but because we do need to talk about your topics. So let's watch this.
Halloween is on sale at Michael's. Get up to 50% off spooky finds to celebrate your way.
You gotta try this. With only 4 ingredients, all natural Trace Deli cream cheese tastes like more.
Mm.
Compared to before. So some typical challenges include warning. Now, the reason
So this is a discussion on how a concrete plant would go about trying to get an ECA. So we'll watch a few minutes of this, about 10 minutes or so, and then we will end our discussion.
Peter and Neil are here this morning is to go over the ECA approval process. And from an association standpoint, we do have 280 eco-certified plants, which means each plant that is certified does need an MOE reference number or an ECA to be approved under our plant certification program. To be certified, you do have to call in consultants such as Neil and Petter to do the modeling and the assessment and to submit this application to the MOE for review. Once it is approved or there is a reference number, we're able to certify you as well, as long as you meet the other requirements of the audit. Having said all that, I will turn it over to Neil first to go over the air portion of the ECAs.
Thank you, Alan. So as Alan explained, these slides will be available online. There's purposely more information on the slides, but I won't go into detail of every single slide or else it'll just take too long. So let's get started. Here's an outline. I'll first go through the types of ECA, ECA application components, the ECA application submission process, and some ECA application challenges. So first off, RMC plants are not eligible for ESER. They do fall under the ECA domain due to their NICE code. So, you have to get an ECA for RMC plant. You can't do an ESER for it. The first type of ECA approval is a standard one. So what it does is it lists its production rate, typically an hourly or daily rate, and each piece of equipment and its operating parameters. So you can see that below there's an example, ready-mix concrete batching plant, its production rate, and you'll have a list of equipment like, your bag houses and loading point dust collectors, etc. The second type of ECA is called a limited operational flexibility, LOF. So the difference with this one is it provides the facility production limit, usually an annual rate. It defines an operating envelope, so a description of the processes. So if you look at the example below, you'll see it's a ready-mix concrete batching plant consisting of the following processes and supporting units like aggregate delivery, cement delivery, concrete batching. So it's something more like generic of the operation. It doesn't list each individual equipment. So that's about it. It might list some equipment that has specific operational parameters, but usually for a ready-mix plant, you wouldn't really have that. So a major difference between a standard one and an LOF ECA is that the addition of equipment and like emission points like silos, dust collectors, or changing a loading point, relocation of equipment on site, change in property line, increase in the rate used or composition of raw materials, changes to ancillary operations such as process heating. For an LOF, you wouldn't need to submit an ECA amendment. But for a standard ECA, you would have to submit an ECA amendment. There are changes that you can't make to an LOF ECA though. For example, you can't change the facility description, such as if it's a RMC plant, it can't, then the application fee. There are a bunch of forms, like the basic forms are like the application form. There's a primary noise screening form if your facility is far away that it might not need acoustic assessment. There's some emission summary checklist, and some additional forms which are more technical would be if you require, like, for example, Schedule 3 standards in advance. there's a form for that. Or if you want to use a specific air dispersion model, there's a form for that. And also some requests for specific met data from MOE to do the air modeling. So those are more of the technical forms involved. So for the ESDM report, the air report, it must follow the ministry's guidance document. So there is a guidance document from the MOE. So that's why a lot of times it's very complex. So it has to be prepared by a qualified air consultant. The main components in the ESDM report are, site and process description, the identification of air emission sources and contaminants, assessment of the significance or insignificance.
So this is the air emissions report we were just talking about.
Of certain sources and contaminants, the maximum operating scenarios, air emission estimates, we do air dispersion modeling, and we compare the results to the ACB benchmark list to see if the site passes. Some typical air emission sources in an RMC plant, considered significant, would be fugitive emissions from material handling, conveyor transfers, your silo dust collectors, your loading point, your mixing, if you have wet plant, the mixing loading, you have a loading point or central mixer dust collector, and the combustion equipment for the process heating. And often insignificant, what they consider insignificant in terms of the guidelines. It's not always the case, but most of the time it's wind erosion, because this will be managed by your best management plan for fugitive dust. Any road dust, same thing. So first we have to submit one hard copy and one soft copy of the application package.
They are now okay with submitting electronic copies entirely.
To the Ministry Client Service and Permissions branch, also known as the Approvals branch. One hard copy to the district office where the plant's located. So what happens when the application gets submitted? It first goes to an application assessment officer, which screens the application for completeness. So this is not a technical review. They just screen it for, they make sure you have all the MOE fees, application forms, the ESDM and AAR have all the all the sections that they require. And after that, they would give you a MOE reference letter, usually about maybe 2 weeks after the submission when they get it. Then the ministry posts the application on the EBR for 45 days for public comments. So it's very important also about this EBR posting, because sometimes, usually not, but the assessment officers can put a wrong description on the EBR. So there's a big difference between RMC plan and cement plan, right, to the public. So, we usually make sure the EBR posting is correct. The ministry completes the technical review. That's when a review engineer at the ministry gets it. They might ask some questions to consult air and noise consultants, and then the ministry issues an ECA.
Sir, you are in mute.
All right.
We are not here.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to leave the RSCs for next week. I don't want to get into them right now. It's an important topic, I think. So who here does not have a group? Who here does not have a group? I don't. Okay. Quentin does not have a group. Who here needs one group member? Who here needs a group member? Qasim, are you able to give me a little bit of time before then? Qasim, do you have 4 group members? Qasim, I asked a question. You have 4 group members? Think so? You don't know so? Does anybody not have 4 group members? Okay. So looks like you all have 4 group members. Okay. Stefan, that would be a great idea, except I don't know how to operate the group function, so I should probably learn it. That is actually a great idea. Excellent. Okay. So I'm gonna start sharing some links with you guys. So I'm gonna share with you some links. These are some environmental cases that you guys can consider. Azim, this is to answer your question. Jeffrey, preferably Ontario. No, it doesn't have to be local. Preferably Ontario because you'll be applying Ontario laws, but it doesn't have to be local. No. You can choose any one of these topics or anyone that you prefer. So what I'm going to need from you guys is that's this week's assessment, online assessment. You have the name you have the name of your group members, and just one of you has to post the topic that you choose. Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording here now. But I'll stay here for another 10 or so minutes.